Hi, and welcome to this second of my series of podcasts from the Pragmatic Luthier. With this series of videos, I want to encourage other guitar makers, whether you be an amateur, beginning, or a practiced builder. I want to encourage you to think maybe a little bit differently. I want to encourage you to question what is in the guitar making business and industry. And for the benefit of guitar players and guitar consumers, I'd like to kind of bring out some information that you may not know that may educate you about your instruments or another instrument purchase that you might make. So the subject today is guitar necks, and I want to begin by ruffling some feathers, and I want everyone who is watching to question what you know and what you do with regard to guitar necks, and that includes consumers. Question what you buy. I'm of the opinion that solid piece guitar necks are now and have been for decades a total waste of wood. Yes, yep, they are easier, I'm sure, to manufacture, and therein lies the big push to keep doing it. But still, they are a waste of wood, and it's pretty easy to see. If you take this neck blank and assume that it was a single billet of wood that you're going to cut this neck blank out of, look at all of this waste right in here that you've created, plus this wedge of waste out here that you've also created. It's not very responsible, as I see it. It's just not responsible. Besides the waste issue, I want to talk briefly about the irony of species of necks. I think we follow traditions all too quickly and easily and too obsequiously, and at the same time we are far too slow to question them or even turn away from them boldly. The tradition of a mahogany neck is inarguable, and it's still there. There are so many people that must have a mahogany neck, and some, I suppose, that have got to have it as a solid piece. And then there are other guitars, jazz guitars, for example, that seem to gravitate toward almost exclusively maple necks. And many of those, again, solid necks. But it doesn't have to be that way. And my contention is that most of the time, it shouldn't be that way at all. I've had players tell me that if they can't feel that neck vibrating in their hand when they play, that they feel that the guitar is inferior. I don't think so. Let's think about that. If a neck is vibrating, it's consuming kinetic energy generated by the strings. But the neck isn't the vibrating diaphragm that brings about the sweetness of the guitar. That real estate is down here in the top. So if we can stiffen a neck, we can not only make it dimensionally more stable possibly, we can keep it from leaking that kinetic energy away from the top, allowing the top to use that energy to produce that sound that we want to hear. I think we can also do some wonderful aesthetic things with a laminated neck by using more than one species, as you see in this neck blank. Now, laminated necks are certainly nothing new. The first laminated necks I saw were, I guess, in a Gibson catalog or an older Gibson Electrics that I saw way back when I was a kid. And I remember probably in 1967 or 8, the first Guild guitars I saw, if I remember correctly, they had 3-piece necks, laminated. Now they were mahogany, but they were laminated 3-piece. So I think there's a tremendous case to be made from the aesthetic standpoint and from a standpoint of dimensional stability and from a standpoint of stiffness and making the guitar more efficient to use a laminated neck. When I put neck blanks together, I start with some sort of an aesthetic scheme, as you can quickly see over here. But I start with the main wood, usually to match the back and rim wood in the guitar, and I just start with a billet. In this case, This is a real tasty billet of curly white ash, and quite thick. It could vary in thickness. And I will rip strips off of that, usually 7/8 of an inch wide. So I get a pair like this, and you can see the grain matches here. And right here is where they were split open. Here's where the saw blade hit them. So I'm going to take those, and where they matched, I'm going to turn them like so. Going back to this plank, this is flat sawn. You can see by the end grain in this that it's nicely flat sawn, so that when I get here and open those up, I get quartered grain. And that's what I want. Now, you can put laminate strips in there, as many or as few as you want, or you could just leave that like that. But you see, when those glue up, you get that nice kind of church door effect in the grain. It's very nice. And this is again, white ash. And I want to encourage anybody who is building, whether it's as a beginning builder or a professional, to consider almost any other species of neck other than what is traditionally just out there all the time. You don't need to have the tradition all the time. Doesn't carve well? Yeah, I hear that objection. Horse hockey. If your tools are sharp, if you've got good rasps, this stuff, it doesn't carve like butter, but then neither does that curly maple that you'd use maybe in a jazz guitar or, in a violin. It works if your tools are sharp. So it's just that easy to glue up a neck blank, and I'll glue that up long enough so that I can get my headpiece and my heel blocks and all the stuff that I need out of that. For the purpose of the video, I just made up this quick rough neck blank out of a scrap of oak, and I made a heel block out of a piece of redwood. Just to show that once I get a neck blank made up, I cut this joint. This is just how the material would have been in the board. And I cut this joint, 15 degrees, of course, at the bandsaw. And I have to refine these surfaces. A lot of ways to do that. I have a jig on my sander to do it with, but now I like to do them with hand planes. It's actually more accurate and takes less time. So these are cut and ready to be assembled, and then this will be assembled a little bit later. When I put my neck blanks together, I have this jig that I made up. This is real simple and it's real handy. Those of you that may be just starting to build, maybe this is an idea you can use. I just have this beam mounted to an MDF surface. I used MDF because it's dead flat and you can depend on it. And it's pretty stable. I put this beam, if you will, on here, and I put a stop over here to stop the headpiece from sliding. And I align the joint, as you can see there. I have this clamp on here to hold the headpiece down so that it doesn't raise up or try to skew itself one way or the other. And I clamp the neck shank, the main neck shank, to this beam. I use a good stiff clamp. I like to use this heavier 4-inch clamp right here, partly because it's a gazillion years old and it was my dad's, so that makes it really useful. To glue the joint, I use a Pony. I believe this is a number 245 clamp. If you don't have any of these, no matter what kind of work you do, get a couple of these. They're very, very strong. They're a deep reach. It's too heavy physically to mount a bridge with, but when you need a longer reach and some strength, they're real good. And then the top of the joint is just glued here. And I have cawls. Always use cawls because obviously you're not going to damage the neck itself, but it spreads clamping pressure. And you can see how the joint would go together. There's no glue in this mock-up. Everything is dry. But this way you can clamp up the neck blank and it won't slip and slide on you. For the purpose of this video, I just made up this out of a scrap of redwood, a heel block. It's just for modeling purposes. I would normally make a stacked heel. I prefer stacked heels as opposed to solid ones because then I don't have to buy 3- and 4-inch thick material to get them. And if you use a a material, your neck blank is stripped up in different species, then you may want those to match all the way up through. So if I stack a heel, I put it in this jig. I made several of these when I had a guitar making class in a nearby high school. And this was real nice because you could just take your stacks to make the heel out of and press them down and glue them up. It worked real well. And then after, you can put your neck blank in and put the heel block on it and get it positioned in the correct spot and clamping pressure on that, and that glues up very, very nicely. This is one of these Pony double clamps. It's model 533 for those of you that might be interested. This device was real simple to make. It's just pinned underneath. You're not using the opposite end of this, but it's just pinned underneath. You can see right through those pipes. So it makes a good clamp. I use this all the time. I have 2 of these here in the shop. So there's the basics as to the way a laminated neck blank would go together. A quick tour of some laminated necks. Here in a parlor guitar, we have walnut as our predominant wood, a solid heel, and the laminates happen to be a little bit of African mahogany and some curly maple. This one, an 8-string bass guitar. The major portion of this neck is butternut, and its laminates are in the center, hard maple, and on each side, black walnut. In each case, I'm trying to bring the center of the guitar body and its binding all the way up through the neck. Here's a small jumbo in curly white ash with Padauk trim. There's the Padauk and a little bit of ash in the center, and continued, larger but the same theme all the way up through. This is a really nice guitar, by the way. Down here, same deal. The aesthetic follows all the way up through. We got a figured maple neck with just walnut and more maple in the center. Next, something a little different. Cherry is our major wood. And you notice here, I used a darker cherry for the heel. I like that contrast, so I included that. And this is a purple heart and maple laminate. I will use exotic woods if I can get them as scraps, recovered or salvaged and leftover material, but I try not to buy too much new stuff at all, except for maybe fingerboards. Here's another maple, and this is just a straight grain plain maple, which I had harvested and sawn, I think, 14 years ago. Walnut laminate with maple in the center, and it just pulls that theme right up through. Here's something a little different. This guitar actually has a laminated neck. I'm sure if you concentrate on that or stop the video, you can see that that neck is laminated. I believe that's 9 strips of black walnut. And there was no color variation, or should I say contrast, put in there because the back is monochromatic. There's no inlay strips here because I didn't want to disturb any of that, what you see in the back. So I laminated this, and this happens to be walnut that I had sawn in October of 1972, believe it or not. And over here, finally, a classical guitar. This is walnut, maple, and another darker strip of walnut. This is guitar number 1. So the important takeaways from the video today. Laminated necks are, I believe, a superior way to put a neck on a guitar because they're stiffer, they're dimensionally more stable than a solid neck, and they don't waste as much wood. They can be used to your benefit. You can laminate the neck in such a way as to enhance the appearance of your instrument. And a laminated neck being stiffer does not wick as much energy away from the top as a solid neck does. You can use any species you want for a neck, as you just saw in the previous segment. So I want to encourage you as a builder to think about some of those options and opportunities. And as a guitar player or a consumer of instruments, I want to encourage you to think about the idea that old traditions don't necessarily have to be stuck with. A lot of times it's a good idea to just think a little differently about these things. So thanks for watching this. I hope you put a like on this, and I hope you might subscribe to my channel. This is Kevin Ledoux at Ledoux Guitars, the Pragmatic Luthier. Thanks for watching.